Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson shared a dramatic, unforgettable courtroom confrontation in the 1992 movie A Few Good Men. Lieutenant Junior Grade Caffey, the text. Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red? Colonel Jessup, I'll answer the question. You want answers? Caffey, I think I'm entitled to them. Jessup, you want answers? Caffey, I want the truth. Jessup, you can't handle the truth. Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's going to do it? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago, and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives. And my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. End of the script. Our SEDRA is YITRO, JETHRO, Exodus chapter 18, verse 1 and following. We know this SEDRA. We know it very well indeed. Rabbinic texts refer to it as Ma'amad Har Sinai, the occasion when the Israelites stood at the foot of Mount Sinai while Moses ascended the mountain to receive Torah from God. If we could each create a mental image of that event right now, most of us would have the image of Moses holding tight to the two tablets of stone on which were inscribed the 10 Commandments. But rabbinic tradition will insist that Moses didn't just receive those two tablets inscribed by the finger of God, but God began the process by which God would ultimately reveal to Moses all of the Torah during the course of the 40-year wandering. And not just that. Along with the Torah, the written law, Torah shebichtav, the rabbis would insist that Moses also received the beginning of the oral law at Sinai, the oral law, Torah shel Ba'al Peh, that continually expanding set of interpretations, elaborations, extensions, clarifications, innovations, that have kept and continues to keep the sacred core of Judaism alive throughout the ages. A confused, unsettled people wanted answers from Moses. What's going on here? Who or what is this God? What is our relationship with God? What do all of the strange events that surrounded our departure from the slavery of Egypt mean to us? How do they obligate us? And Moses, where do we go from here? They wanted the truth. They felt entitled to the truth. At least they said that they wanted the truth. But like Colonel Jessup, it seemed that there were forces at work at that moment that didn't at all believe that the Israelites could actually handle the truth if it were handed to them. The world was turned upside down at Sinai. The Israelites were hearing the lightning, seeing the thunder. Now, how is that possible? They swarmed toward the quaking Mount of Revelation to learn the nature of God, but then they were commanded to immediately pull away from the mountain because proximity to God could be fatal. The God who delivered them from Pharaoh was ultimately unapproachable. Their desire to approach God was already then some form of transgression. Then the voice of God began to speak the cores of God's demands. And the power of that experience left many of the people unconscious on the desert floor. They had wanted the truth, but the process of receiving that truth seemed quite likely to be fatal to them. Here's the truth. They could never survive an encounter with God's unmediated presence. In the words of Bachya ibn Pekuda, the Israelites were sick souls, sick because they were so very far distant from God. They were seeking wholeness. They were seeking healing. As Aviva Zornberg wrote, they sought shelter beneath the wings of Shekhinah. They sought healing through what they could learn and what they could experience. They had experienced God's love and God's vengeance and God's justice and God's punishing power and God's redemptive love. A smoking mountain, a burning furnace. And is it a surprise that what they had experienced, they couldn't comprehend? How does one comprehend the shattering of all that you expect out of nature? Did you notice how quickly the people responded? The terrified people responded, all that God is teaching we will do and we will hearken. Na'aseh v'nishma. Was that a commitment to all that God would reveal as an expression of total devotion? That's what the rabbis would have us understand. Or was Na'aseh v'nishma a desperate pleading of a people who were fearing for their very lives? We'll do it, just back away, we'll do it. The Israelites were more than baffled. They were horrified. They were terrified. Fire, clouds, thunder and lightning, multiple voices driving away all silence, the sounding of shofarot, earthquakes as physical reminders of the instability of human life. Ma'amad Har Sinai must have been unbearable. Zornberg calls it an occasion of radical instability. And it was precisely that experience of radical instability that prepared us to handle truth, taught us how to approach God carefully, and allowed us to begin to understand the role that God plays in our lives. The truth that emerged out of Sinai was unbearable. The eternal task of bearing witness to Sinai cannot be sloughed off onto others who did not see themselves as actually having been there, having witnessed the shattering of all natural norms, having fled toward God, and then having fled far from the divine presence, having felt the danger of God's loving embrace, and thus having experienced both ambivalence and oscillation. But even as the truth that emerged out of Sinai was unbearable, so was it simultaneously transcendent, transformative, healing, and embracing. Once our easy assumptions were lying shattered on the desert floor, once we realized how the love of God cannot be fully experienced without also experiencing fear and uncertainty, we were then ready to begin hearing and feeling and experiencing the words of Torah. grappling with the content of what Moses and the rabbis and all future teachers would set before us. Those words would become the living Torah with which we wrestle every week. Those words would become the Torah, which, the more we wrestle with it, the more it moves us toward the lifting up of our very own humanity. Those words of Torah, all of Torah, have served to raise us up on eagle's wings, allowing us to soar beyond all of our limitations and insufficiencies. You want answers? You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. Yes, we actually do want answers. And yes, we do want the truth. And yes, we will be able to handle the truth. Because over thousands of years, day by day, in wrestling with Torah, we have learned how to handle the truth. Wow, okay. Have a wonderful Shabbat, God willing. We'll see each other